Are you going to be quiet? Okay. Hopefully she'll be quiet. Okay, all the kids just came home from school, so hang on just a second while the other dogs stop barking, and I'll start reading all the official things, and thank you to everyone's patience. All right, thank you for everybody's patience. I'm Chair Jake Riley, and the January 13th, 2022 meeting of the Zoning Committee of the St. Paul Planning Commission will now come to order. For the record, the chair of the Planning Commission has previously determined that it is not practical nor prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person pursuant to Minnesota Statutes Section 13D.02. Considering the COVID-19 health pandemic, it is not feasible for any member of the zoning committee to be present at our regular location. Committee members attending this meeting are doing so by telephone or other electronic means. It is also not feasible for members of the public to attend the meeting at its regular location due to the health pandemic and emergency. Arrangements have been made so that applicants and members of the public may also attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. Accordingly, no meeting is being held in City Hall Council Chambers at 15 West Kellogg Boulevard at this time. Again, the public hearing is being conducted remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting is also being recorded. Even though this hearing is being conducted remotely, the committee's public hearing rules and procedures still apply as if the committee were meeting in its usual place. Those rules and procedures are as follows. The zoning committee's recommendations and findings must have a rational basis based upon the St. Paul zoning code and applicable state and federal laws. Zoning committee's actions today are recommendations. They are not final decisions. The committee's recommendations are forwarded to the Planning Commission for final action. The committee's recommendations will be considered by the full Planning Commission at its regular meeting held 1 week from Friday. The Planning Commission's meeting is open to the public, but it is not a public hearing. The decisions of the Planning Commission on conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, site plans, variances, and other zoning permits are final decisions unless appealed to the City Council. The decisions of the Planning Commission on rezoning applications are only recommendations. By state law, the City Council, following a public hearing before it, makes the final decision on rezoning applications. The following rules and procedures govern today's public hearing of the Zoning Committee. The chair will call the secretary to take attendance by the committee. Committee members will need to respond verbally for the record. Committee members, during the meeting, please mute your microphone except when recognized by the chair to speak. Discussion is intended for committee members and staff only, except during public hearing items when the chair invites individuals to speak. Staff will be monitoring microphones and muting committee members and members of the public as needed. Use the chat function only to indicate that you have a question or comment. The chat function is part of the official meeting record. Type Q or question into the chat feature when you have a question, and or C or comment if you have a comment. The chair and staff will monitor the chat function so that the chair may recognize committee members and staff in an early way. After being recognized by the chair, committee members should state their name before speaking. This helps others at the meeting and assists with the official recording. When the chair calls the committee to vote on agenda items, the secretary will be called to do a roll call. Committee members must respond verbally for the record and vote either yes or no. Cases will be called in the order they appear on the agenda, and the chair reserves the right to limit the length of testimony if deemed necessary. I will now ask the recording secretary to conduct a roll call of the committee members that are present for this meeting. Each committee member should acknowledge their presence by saying here.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Here.
Commissioner Grill?
Here.
Commissioner Hood?
Here.
Commissioner Randall Morales? Commissioner Riley?
Here.
Commissioner Said?
Here.
And Commissioner Tegia?
Here.
6 present.
Thank you. If you are a member of the public that would like to speak during a specific item's public hearing, you'll be asked to identify yourself at the appropriate time. The public shall not utilize the chat for communicating public testimony, as it is not considered part of the public record. After I read the item number and title, staff will give an oral report on the item, and then I will open up the floor for committee members to ask questions of staff. After that, I will open the public hearing on the item as applicable. All testimony and questions will be addressed to the chair. You may speak in favor or in opposition, and you will be limited to no more than 2 minutes. People who exceed the time limit may have their microphones muted by staff. I will first ask for testimony from those in favor and then from those in opposition. You must provide your name and address for the public record. Please mute yourself during this meeting, except during your 2 minutes when you are specifically called upon to speak. You are allowed to speak only once, with the exception of the applicant, who will be allowed an opportunity to respond to the testimony and answer committee questions. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of the December 30, 2021 zoning committee minutes. Sam? Sorry, no, we have a motion for approval, please.
Oh, this is Commissioner Sayed. I'll have a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Commissioner.
Joy will second the motion.
Oh,
Thank you, Commissioner Said, for the motion, and Commissioner DeJoy for the second. Sam?
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Grimm,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Tegia,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great, thank you. And the next item on our agenda is the list of site plan review applications. The next site plan review committee meeting is Tuesday, January 18th at 9 a.m. At 9:15, Hardeen Academy will go through a site plan review. That's at 548 Snelling Avenue. It's been a while since I've had a agenda to recite, so that's that done. And now we have our items of old business, 21-327115 and 21-325415, both regarding 470 South Lexington, which is a conditional use permit and variances for a multifamily building, along with the site plan review. This was laid over from the last meeting. And Mr. Jervy is going to provide a brief presentation related to the supplemental information that's available on the website. Go ahead, Mr. Jervy, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair and zoning committee members. Just as an apology, I'm fighting a head cold here, non-COVID, but my goal here is to be intelligible. So let me pull up my PowerPoint here. So this is just to walk you quickly through the information that was in the supplemental memo that was sent to the zoning committee yesterday for 470 Lexington Parkway. Just a reminder that the zoning committee requested that staff work with the applicant to provide a little more context around the findings related to section 61601C, and that relates to practical difficulties and reasonable use, and section 61601D, which is circumstances unique to the property. So a little bit background on the precedent decisions that led up to this. There was a previous application by the applicant and a slightly different development team that was approved by the Planning Commission in March 19th of 2021. As that worked its way through the zoning committee, originally the zoning committee disagreed with the staff report that recommended denial for some of the variances. The but then the zoning committee recommended approval, planning commission recommended approval. And it was staff's reading of the current application that it's not substantially different in terms of building form than the previous application. I'll dig into that a little bit here in a second. So my staff report that was at the last meeting builds upon the recommendation for approval of my previous staff report, really built upon the planning commission's analysis and conclusions from that first approval from March 19th. So the changes, the main changes in terms of the form and building that is before you today, there's 3 of them. One is a minor increase to the building's footprint in the southeast corner. And here you can see a graphic that overlays the previous building footprint in orange over the gray of the current application. So you see a portion of outside of this hash zone in the gray that's represents new. It is a slight increase of the previous application. In staff's view, this is kind of less of a key facade, given that it's along the alley. Really, the most visible facades are on James and Lexington Avenue. These tend to be the facades that have public fronting face, given that they're adjacent to the sidewalk and public streets, and we tend to, within the zoning code, give more scrutiny to those and have higher design requirements for those facades. The other main difference was an increase in the overall building height by about a little over 4 feet. The main potential impact to increasing the height would be to James Avenue and to properties from the north. However, the current or the newer current design actually set back the roof, the 5th floor roof, or not, the whole 5th floor is set back further from James Avenue than in the previous application. So that provides more allowances for light to reach James Avenue, and less of a chance that the taller building will make any difference in terms of shading to the north. And then the third major change is slight decreases in a couple of the setbacks, the front yard setback and the south side yard setback, to accommodate a design change for balconies. You'll see the 3 spots where there's balconies in the front on Lexington here, and then again 2 areas where there's balconies that stick out. And these balconies have been something that we've been kind of tracking in terms of setbacks. Balconies tend to be things that we like. They add kind of break up the facade architecturally. It allows for people in the building to have eyes on the street and better SEPTED principles. Gives people access from the apartments to light and air, and particularly as we're in lockdown or socially distancing, it gives folks a way to get outside and get some fresh air. So this is just a summary of the changes from in terms of the main numbers from the previous approval to the current application. You'll see the changes are pretty minimal. And then relating to digging into those findings, and again, it's the 2 findings that the zoning committee asked for at section 601C. The applicant has established their practical difficulties in complying with the provision that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, not permitted by the provision, and economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Again, sorry for I cannot even read today. But and then section 601D, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the landowner. And one of the main, or the main practical difficulty here is the grade. We talked about this quite a bit at the previous zoning committee meeting. There was some, I guess there wasn't clarity on precisely how the grade is affecting the height and the setbacks. So in the memo, I wanted to kind of lay that out and quantify it a little more clearly so you understand precisely how this 25-foot change in grade is really a practical difficulty for this development. And as a way to illustrate that point, I'm showing an example here of, okay, if we're looking at a flat site, this would be the facade, the north-facing facade on a flat site. So Lexington would be this side. Flat site, simple construction, same building, that would reduce the measured height to 55 feet 10 inches, and the required setbacks, again, because they're related to height. So every or half the height above 50 feet is then added on to the 9-foot base setback. So that would give the side and rear required setbacks of 11 feet, 11 inches. So the change only related to the change in grade is 14 feet in height and 7 feet of side and rear setbacks. So the impact is basically adding over a story of height to the project and reducing a lot of the buildable area of the site by having these greater setbacks. I think it's like 3,800 square feet reduction in site area that they can use. As another example, the applicant provided a hypothetical scenario where instead of building on the 6 lots at Lexington and James, what if they built at the first 6 lots at Randolph and Lexington, given that, these lots are flatter, just looking at the topography, and they're also kind of the standard depth, where if you look at James Avenue at Lexington, it jogs down and makes the block it makes the lot sizes on the current block shorter than kind of your typical depth. And what the applicant is showing, that you take the same building, you plop it in that flatter, wider series of 6 lots, and it fits in. It would still need a cut, but it wouldn't need any variances to fit. The other thing contributing to practical difficulties is, hold on. I'm sorry. The other thing contributing to practical difficulties is the density incentives. So in RM2 zoning, we have density bonuses for structured parking, also for affordable housing. These are good things. These are things we've decided we want to incentivize. We have them as density bonuses in the zoning code because we want people to use them. So as we consider these projects, these density bonuses implement city policy by building affordable housing and building more housing. Well, it's a critical need in the city. They're consistent with the comp plan, having just gone through comp plan amendment or zoning code amendment process, and also rezoning the site to RM2 after the study. We know what the study includes. we know what RM2 includes, and we decided that rezoning the site would be consistent with the comp plan. And it's also reasonable to expect that property owners are going to want to develop to the full extent of the property. This becomes a practical difficulty as you take this density, you're trying to fit it into a site, you're trying to fit it into a complicated slope. You're also trying to manage that density in a way that has compatibility with the neighborhood. So if you have so many square feet, you can go narrower or taller, or you can go wider and shorter. But you're probably going to need some kind of wiggle room in terms of variances as you go through the approval process. And this is precisely what this process is for with the conditional use permit and the variances, is to make sure that you're kind of meeting those overall goals. As an example, again, the applicant has provided these different examples of how potentially you could go up taller, add another story with maybe a little less FAR, and have the same or achieve the same or similar density, but going up taller. But if you go up taller, you're going to have more shading impacts, particularly across James, and coming in at that 5 foot, or sorry, 5-story level is kind of a reasonable solution. But that means you need to be able to build out wider, and you need those variances for the setbacks. Another option that they're showing here is the way they could reduce FARs by just build less density and cut out the affordable housing. This would shorten the building and get it within the setback requirements, but then again, you're not achieving the goals of affordable housing. An option they didn't put in there, we have no parking requirements. So in theory, you could build a building that would drop the whole thing 2 stories and have no parking. It's allowed by code, but is that really a reasonable solution? And are you going to have spillover effects from not having any parking for the building? So based on all this, and hopefully this is clear, but really I'm having to lean on my staff report heavily here, just given my cold. But based on all this, the supplemental information, my recommendation is still that the previous staff recommendation as noted in section J of my previous staff report. And with that, I'm happy to kind of take any questions on this memo.
Thank you, Mr. Derby. I really, really appreciated that. You. Yeah, the supplemental memo, etc. So thank you very much for that. And I want, before I open the floor to the committee for questions, I want to apologize to the applicant for not allowing the opportunity to respond to the testimony during the public hearing 2 weeks ago. It was kind of a bit of a mess, so I apologize, and I'm glad that you were able to submit a letter. We will not be opening the public hearing again on this matter. And if folks have questions that they'd like to ask Mr. Jervy, please do. All right, I don't see any questions from the committee. If that's accurate, stop me now. If that's inaccurate, stop me. One thing I do want to do procedurally is first off, we can go back to that vote that was recommending denial. And so first, I think I would consider Commissioner Grill. And then Commissioner Tagioff.
I can put my hand on too. I didn't know if we were getting into discussion or if you wanted to go through procedural items first. This is Commissioner Grill.
Yeah, I think that if there, thanks, Commissioner Grill. I think that if there are questions for Anton right now about the supplemental information, I want to get through those first. So I didn't see any of those. So then I want to sort of outline our options procedurally if that works for the rest of the committee. Commissioner Tagioff.
Just a question for you, Chair. I noticed there was also a supplemental memo relating to the yellow tree pieces. Did you want to address that as a procedural point?
Sure, I can. That we're not going to address it, that it's included in the documentation because it was provided, but it is not germane to the situation.
Wonderful. I thought that was a reasonable thing to put in the record to avoid confusion. I was going to say that I'm certainly not going to let that color my judgment, and I'm assuming that's true of the entire committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Tagioff. So procedurally, we can we can finalize the denial, or we can have a new motion to approve the application as is. I think ideally, if someone wants to make a motion to reconsider the denial and that someone is not Commissioner Grill or Commissioner Said, we can do that. And then from there, entertain a motion to approve. Does that work for the, yes, Mr. Warner? Did I mess that up?
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. No, you did not mess that up. I was just going to point out that if the board is going to consider a motion to reconsider, the reason why you mentioned Commissioners Grill and Said is because they had voted in favor of the approval. And so if there's a motion to reconsider, that motion has to be brought by a member of the group that voted in opposition to the approval. It's a Robert's Rules thing.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. We don't also, I think, can forego a motion to reconsider the denial, and we can entertain a new motion since that motion failed on Thursday. Is that accurate, Mr. Warner?
To a degree, but you have to keep in mind that Minnesota 1599 says that a application that is recommended for approval that fails is deemed to be a denial. Whether that applies to the zoning committee strictly because you're just giving an advisory recommendation to the full planning commission, that is certainly something that lawyers can debate. It depends. If you just like to have a renewed motion to either approve or deny, given that you're making a recommendation to the full commission, I suppose that would pass muster as well. It's a little vague, but let's not get too worried about that aspect of the statutory interpretation and have the committee go ahead and do its business.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. This is Chair Riley. Let's do the motion. If someone would make a motion to reconsider the denial, I would appreciate that from a 1599 standpoint. So I think the folks who are on the call who could do that are Commissioner Tagioff, Commissioner DeJoy, or me if I need to. Commissioner Tagioff.
I'm so sorry. I've never had a motion to reconsider a denial, and I'm not sure what that means.
So we would, you would, if I understand correctly, and Mr. Warner can correct me if I'm wrong, you, for example, would make a motion to reconsider the motion to deny from the December 30th meeting.
Chair,
And-
essentially that's right. It would be a motion to reconsider the denial that's imposed under 1599 because the motion to approve failed. And, you haven't reached a final decision yet because you also laid the matter over for staff to give you some additional information. So now armed with that additional information, an option certainly would be for 1599 purposes to have a motion to reconsider that the failed motion.
Right. And so then the end result of that would be either if we reconsider the denial and then vote to deny, that finishes that part, or if that motion to reconsider fails, then someone can entertain or present a motion to approve. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. Did that help, Commissioner Tagioff?
Somewhat. I think procedurally we need a motion to reconsider. So I will do that. So
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the I suppose the previous implied 1599 denial, if I understand that correctly. I'll make that motion as required by 1599.
This is Commissioner DeJoy. I will second the motion to reconsider the motion to deny made on December 30th.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners Tagioff and DeJoy. And now the vote that will be taken by roll call by Sam after Commissioner Grill makes a statement or asks a question would be to deny. So go ahead, Commissioner Grill.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Grill. So I think folks sort of know where I stand on this. I think these are minor changes. I think they're adding balconies. I think they're adding units without substantially adding size and additional height. And I think we add additional affordable housing units. So I am overwhelmingly in favor of this particular project. I think it meets all the requirements. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that this is the place that we are in today. And I was surprised 2 weeks ago. So just sort of making my thoughts known on this particular motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. All right. Ms. Langer, will you call the roll call?
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
No.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
No. And I want to I check in with Commissioner Said because he had voted no before as well.
Chair, this is a motion to reconsider. So
To just reconsider.
right. So if you're reconsidering and it's adopted right now, you've got 4 votes in favor, 2 against. That basically wipes the slate clean, and now you can basically, for lack of a better
Entertain a
term,
new motion.
right, you can do a redo here. You can discuss the matter and then take another vote, and that will be
Perfect.
your final vote.
All right. Thank you. I think I missed that connection. So thank you. All right. Sam, go ahead with our result. I'm really sorry.
4 in favor, 2 opposed.
Okay. Thank you. Now, would someone like to present a new motion on this matter? Perhaps Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I would like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation based on the findings provided in the packet and then the additional memo with the additional staff recommendation or staff requirements 1 through 4. So final plans approved, complying with the floor area ratio, front yard setbacks, boulevard trees, all of those is aligned or outlined in the staff recommendation. So I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. The motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner DeJoy.
Thank you, Commissioner DeJoy. Ms. Langer, the roll call, or any discussion on the motion? Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Langer.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
No.
Commissioner Tegia,
No.
Commissioner Said,
No.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
3 in favor, 3 opposed.
Mr.
Chair,
Warner.
so that motion failed. So now you've got a couple of options. You can discuss the matter further, maybe take another vote, maybe opt to simply submit the entire matter to the full Planning Commission with no recommendation, or somebody can basically renew the previous previous denial and arguably use the exact same reasons. So you'll have to discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Does anybody? I guess I'll just say from the chair's perspective, I thought that the information that was provided by Mr. Jervy in the supplemental information answered all of my sort of confusion around the matter, and that's why I'm now in favor of this particular application. But there's 21 of us when it all is said and done. So I think we could discuss what we want to do next. Commissioner Tagia.
I don't know if I have a solution, but I have a little context as to why I'm still a no. And I think it boils down to trying to differentiate between the prior records and sort of thinking about this application de novo, because I do find a lot of the new reasoning reasonably compelling, right? The putting in Mr. Joey's report put a number on the grade change and really sort of contextualized it and explained why the side setbacks and rear setbacks and height CUP all kind of make sense for this particular application, and the site is extremely challenging on grade. The thing that tripped me up last time was really looking at the previous records and, understanding that kind of we'd had a building that had come before us, and it almost feels like the previous record somewhat undercuts the practical difficulties. And my concern was making sure we had a really solid basis on finding C for that reason. Having looked at a building that did meet, that originally a few months ago was significantly smaller and was per the minutes was said to be architecturally feasible. And the thing that's really changed in the intervening months has been that we've removed minimum parking requirements, so they've been able to pull the parking ratio down from 0.96 to 0.71 and sort of solve some of those problems. And they've increased the number of units by about 25% because they realized they miscalculated the FAR, which seems to be an economic versus a practical consideration. So that's the piece that I may be struggling with. I'd almost be more tempted to change my vote, looking at it as a completely new application versus if I were to discard that previous record from my mind. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of the piece I'm struggling with a little bit. Whether the new memo overcomes those concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Tagioff. Anyone else care to share their thoughts. Yes, go
Sure.
ahead, Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'm actually wondering if Mr. Warner has any comments on that particular front, in sort of how the commission should be, or how the committee should be viewing this particular project in light of the older documentation in addition and to the new documentation provided. I'm wondering if that might help some of the commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, I really don't have anything to say in that regard, other than you have a staff report with the same project in a somewhat different format, and I would only note that previously the position of the commission was to approve the project, and the project has changed in terms of dimensions, to the extent that that has been represented by the applicant. Whether or not that is cause enough for you to continue with the previous idea of approval, if the project is that much different now that you feel that you can't do that, that's absolutely your prerogative. And so I really don't have any guidance for you in that regard. This is your call. It's not a legal question at this point. It's a policy question. Staff has made a reasonable recommendation. Some of you may have doubts about that recommendation, and that is entirely within your prerogative as commissioners. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Commissioner Grill, is your I think for me, I don't know if this is helpful, but for me, the chair, when I look at the table on page 2 of the supplemental memo information, and the previous approval from March of 2021 versus this December application, what I see is a project that is not substantially, for me, the initial issue were the issue of the setbacks, and I don't see a substantial difference in the setbacks at all to the previous approval, and I believe I voted to deny the previously approved application because I was not confident about the affordability and the parking space issue, both of which have been accommodated by this new application. And I think if we think about how this building might look on a flat piece of ground versus this sloped piece of ground, we might have a different conversation. But as noted in the comparison from Mr. Jervy, sort of same project on a flat site on page 4, and the changes due to the grade, it becomes clear to me that the practical difficulties are purely associated with the rationale behind the setbacks and the height. So that's kind of where my change in vote comes from, and why I very much appreciate the graphics and the tables that Mr. Jervy put together. So I don't know if that helps Mr. Tagioff think differently about this, or if Commissioners Hood or Said have anything to add, or Commissioner DeJoy. I think, like Mr. Warner said, we have a couple options. The motion can fail and we can have a new one, or we can choose to send that vote, the 3-3 vote, to the Planning Commission as a whole and have a discussion and share our opinions about our rationale with the full Planning Commission 1 week from tomorrow. anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other?
Chair, this is Commissioner DeJoy. I'm thinking that perhaps we should bring it to the full planning commission. I don't anticipate changing my vote. So we might just, if we're still where we're at, then the motion, it technically fails when it ties, right?
Yeah, yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Ah, all right. Well, I saw all three of you, Commissioner Grill, Tagiaf, and Said, all at the same time. So perhaps we'd like to hear from Commissioner Said since I haven't heard from him.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Chair. And I agree, Commissioner DeJoy, that we just need to bring it to the full floor planning commission meeting.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I actually was curious about Commissioner Sayed's thoughts on the matter because he did change his vote between the previous week and this week. And I'm just curious about rationale because I thought he was initially in favor of the project.
Thanks, Commissioner Grill, Chair. And yeah, when I looked at then the old application were at it, and I kind of a little bit confused that way, and also the wasn't clear for me, and that's that's the reason that I changed. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Said. Relabel, Commissioner Grill, was that satisfactory for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is Commissioner Grill. I think we can keep sort of having the conversation. I mean, my preference is always that we have a vote one way or the other to come out of the committee to recommend to the full commission, be it for or against, just because, you know, to do the work in the committee. And we've all had the time and several meetings and the testimony. So my preference is always to be able to come to the full commission with a recommendation. But if this is sort of the will of the committee, I'm happy to support that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. This is Chair Riley again. Commissioner Hood, any thoughts on sending this forward to the full planning commission with no recommendation? Anything that could help us get through
Thank
here?
you, Chair Riley. Thank you, Chair Riley. I have no additional comments.
All right, this is Chair Riley again. I'm guessing we need a motion to send it to committee without a recommendation. Is that correct?
Chair,
just...
this is Peter Warner. I think for formality purposes, why don't you do that?
All right, thank you, Mr. Warner.
Do you need a motion?
I do need a motion, Commissioner DeJoy. Thank you.
So this is Commissioner DeJoy. I vote since the resolution on the table failed, that we do not, the zoning committee does not have a recommendation, and we bring this issue to the full planning commission meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner DeJoy. Motion has been made, and I would like a second, please.
This is Commissioner Said. I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Said. Excuse me. All right, any discussion on that particular motion? I'm going to assume none and ask Ms. Langer to take the vote.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
And Chair Riley?
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Jervy. I wonder if it might be possible for you to provide a brief presentation to the full Planning Commission 1 week from tomorrow, just to help everybody through this one. And I think we can move on to our next item on the agenda, which is new business 21-329 543 540 Randolph. Oh, thank you, Ashley. Yep, sorry. We also need to go on to the second note of the business, which is the site plan review, which we took together last time as one motion. And so I wonder if Ashley's question is, did we do this with the same thing here? Mr. Warner?
Thanks,
We took
Chair.
them together last time.
Yep, you did. I guess I mistakenly assumed that you would have done that here. You haven't. That hasn't been verbalized and made formal. So if it's the intent to move both of them along, perhaps just a quick affirmation from your colleagues that that's the intent, and then the full Planning Commission can wrestle with that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Warner. That was my intent, and I should have stated that more clearly. And if everyone else can verbally say, perhaps, should we have Sam just poll everybody with a yes or a no, that's the understanding that we're moving both items together?
Perfect and simple.
Great. Thank you.
As the maker of the motion, I will add that it was meant to be both.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank
Sam.
you.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ashley, for raising her hand, reminding me that we had actually two items there. All right, on to our new business, item number 21-329 543, which is 540 Randolph, rezoning from T2 traditional neighborhood to I1 light industrial, which is at Randolph between Erie and Oneida. And we have Mr. Jervy again to present this one. And then we'll have discussion and then the public hearing. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, Chair and Commissioners. This rezoning application is a bit more straightforward. Just let me pull up my presentation. It's also a bit shorter. Okay. All right, so this application is to rezone from T2 to I1 for 540 Randolph Avenue. So the project is this parcel here, just located at the south west corner of Erie and Randolph Avenue. It just as a note to the commission, the parcel is actually a bit bigger, connecting to this other parcel is owned by the same property owner, the applicant. His intent is to recently purchased both the properties, and his intent is to combine the parcels and thus to avoid the split zone and to allow full use of the site. He would like to rezone from T2 to I1. This is the land use map for the site. You see it's all industrial around here. It has been for decades. It is currently zone T2. It was rezoned as part of the Schmidt Brewery rezoning study that was happened several years ago in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. And the border for that was just right what was formerly Randolph right of way, but in the decades following that, is Randolph shifted to the north. The properties also has a sliver of it within the critical area. It doesn't come into play with the rezoning. We just wanted to flag it for you that it is part of that. For the RC4 critical area designation, it just means that the underlying zoning, you can build everything in the underlying zoning. You just have to make sure that whatever you build there does not pollute waters. And this is an aerial that shows how it has been industrial use for decades. And I thought that roundhouse was kind of cool. Just want to share that. But in any case, it meets the findings for rezoning as identified in the staff report. And for those reasons, I'm recommending approval. Happy to answer any questions, but this application is pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Mr. Jervie. Commissioner Grill?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Grell. Just looking at the aerials and all those and the maps, there will be requirements for some landscaping and some other things that would come up as part of the site plan process, correct? Just looking at the property and sort of the expanse of open space. I think that's all addressed in the site plan process. Just sort of looking for confirmation on that.
Yeah, Chair Riley and Commissioner Grill, there's no proposal for the property right now, just to be totally clear. But if and when there's an application for any development or improvements there would be likely some screening requirements, and it would have to meet all the requirements for I-1 zoning as well. And then anything built within that sub-triangle of critical overlay would have to meet the critical overlay requirements as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair Riley, thank you, Mr. Jervie. Anybody else have any questions for staff? I have one question. What is the round thing in the 1940 aerial? Also, that's really cool.
Chair Riley, I think this is a roundhouse. So if you're a Thomas the Train fan, you've probably seen them, but is where they would have a moving track and then store the different train cars in a round building.
That was my guess. I just wanted someone to confirm. I really appreciate being able to see that. That's kind of cool. All right. Well, with no more questions for staff, I'll open the public hearing for the applicant to come forward if the applicant's here. Do you know if he's here, Mr. Jervie? Or they are here?
But Chair, I'm looking at the participants. I know he's planning to come. I don't know if he had to duck out early. I don't see him on the attendees list right now.
Okay. Well, in the interim, I'll ask if there's anybody here to speak in favor of this application. Anyone here in favor of this application for rezoning 560 Randolph Avenue? I'm sorry, 540 Randolph Avenue. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application to rezone 540 Randolph? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Mr. Jervie.
I'm not in opposition, just to clarify. that we did get 2 letters of support, and the district council had not commented. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much for that additional information. I'll ask one last time if there's anyone here to speak in opposition to this application. And seeing none, we can close the public hearing. Commissioner DeJoy.
Yes, if the public hearing is closed, then I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
Okay. I motion to support the staff recommendation approving the rezoning from T2 traditional neighborhood to I1 light industrial at 540 Randolph Avenue.
Thank you, Commissioner DeJoy. Commissioner DeJoy made the motion. Is there someone to second? Commissioner Said?
I'll second the motion.
Great. The staff recommendation has been moved and seconded. Ms. Langer, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Said, Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagioff,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jerby. And with that, we will forward that recommendation to the Planning Commission 1 week from tomorrow. The ultimate decision on a rezoning is from the City Council. Next on the agenda is Mr. Williams with a McAllister College campus boundary expansion, case number 21-328-826, a conditional use permit for the expansion of the McAllister College campus boundary at 1657 Lincoln Avenue between McAllister and Cambridge Streets. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Riley, Commissioners. It's good to see you all again. I am going to share my screen where I have a brief presentation. And then when I'm done, I will throw it back to Sam in order to take questions. So one moment here. Wait, are you guys seeing that? Apologies, I just
Not
outwitted
yet.
myself with
No.
technology. All right, you should be seeing it now.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so it's good to talk with you again, Commissioners. Yeah, so as Chair Riley introduced, the application in front of you is for an addition to the McAllister College campus. Specifically, it's to add a single residential lot at 1657 Lincoln Avenue to that campus. And I'll go through a few things and then present my staff recommendation. Apologies. And then go on. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, I'm not sure which commissioners in the current configuration of the zoning committee are familiar with, sort of the overview of how we regulate via zoning college campuses and universities and seminaries here in St. Paul. But I wanted to give some brief background on that. Then I'll go through my staff report, summarize it and give a recommendation, and then I'd be happy to take any questions before we move out to the public hearing. So a couple of things. The CUP for college campuses is in some ways unique, in some ways, similar to the other reasons we use CUPs. If you think about college campuses, they're really a bundle of uses versus an individual use on an individual property. You may have things like housing, offices, classroom space. You may have things like a physical plant or an athletic center or dining halls. So some of those things would be allowed, outside of a CUP process in residential districts. Some aren't. The intent of a CUP for a college campus is to define the boundaries, and then within those boundaries, where it overlaps with residential districts, to allow for campus uses. Beyond sort of just the use question, there's also the dimensional question, right? If you think about what a typical college campus looks like, you have larger buildings, maybe set farther apart. You have things like parking. It's just a different built form than, certainly than a single family neighborhood, and probably different than most sort of residential neighborhoods, which is why we have the CUP process to make sure that where a college, university, or seminary campus is located within a residential district, that we have worked with the college and thought about sort of the arrangement of buildings and all those sorts of things, so that those campuses aren't having undue impact on the surrounding properties. We do that through the standards in section 65.220 of the zoning code. If you look at your staff report on this item, that a portion of that code is referenced in there. The code not only sets out overall standards for the college campuses, but provides for expansion of those campuses. Now, if you'll notice the third bullet item on your screen, I have annual review with a question mark. Prior to the recent changes to our parking requirements in the city of St. Paul, we used to do annual monitoring of college campuses, and basically the idea was to understand where they were in terms of number of employees, number of students, both on and off campus, looking at things like number of dorm beds, and those were all brought together under, in a way that's described under, again, section 65.220 of the zoning code. And then that came up with an overall campus minimum parking requirement. Of course, with the elimination of campus parking requirements, that included some amendments to chapter 65, section 0.220. So that is not something we anticipate doing. But I will note there are some other requirements in that section. Specifically, there are some requirements regarding the location of things like stadiums, theaters, or other things that will other facilities that might generate large events, and the distance of parking from those facilities. So that's something staff is still needs to work through in terms of whether or not we need to make any additional changes to the code, and more importantly, how we monitor that on an ongoing basis. That's not really relevant to this particular case, but again, since these questions don't come up too often in front of the zoning committee, I wanted to give a little background. The final thing, and I already mentioned this, that chapter 65.220 does is to provide standards for evaluating an application for expansion of a college campus, which is the question in front of us today for Macalester College, and that's requires issuing of a conditional use permit. So I did want to provide this map. I know the one that showed up in your packet was probably pretty hard to read. This is what it looked like on my screen before I generated a PDF to be included in the packet. I know that it does not look like this in your packets. So if you can see my cursor here, everything in the sort of mauve background is part of the campus. It looks like we may need to do some adjustments to our boundary here, but the stuff that's cross-hatched and has the darker purple border around it is part of the campus. The property in question is right here. It is an individual single-family home, and it's located right next to the existing campus. If you look in your packets, you might be able, there is a close-up that has it's an aerial background, and you can see the actual property. Although I would note that on that image, the property lines don't line up exactly. But that is what we were talking about today. So you have the existing campus. It's really just adding this, what would otherwise be a single family residential lot. So to summarize my finding, my staff recommendation, if you refer to your report, all the findings for both the general CUP standards, as well as the conditions for an expansion of campus are met. I think there are a couple key things here to consider. And again, this is in the staff report. One is that the applicant has confirmed they don't have any current plans for enrollment growth or any major campus changes. Even if they did, that has no real relation to what's happening here. In this case, the McAllister College has owned the property for quite some time. They've used it in the past for faculty housing, whether that be visiting faculty or faculty new to the area who wanted to rent it. That use does not require a CUP. It is allowed by the underlying zoning. In this case, the college is going to be using the 1657 Lincoln property for office space. If you look at the third bullet, we talk about no impact, or I indicate no impact on surrounding neighborhood anticipated. If this house were owned by an individual who wanted to run a home occupation, they'd be able to run a business out of this property. Having existing college staff use this property for office space, it doesn't result in any additional traffic. It's not related, as I said before, to any sort of future expansion plans or enrollment growth. It's simply to allow the college a little bit more flexibility in the use of the property. So on that basis, I am recommending approval of the applied for CUP to expand the campus to include 1657 Lincoln. And my recommendation is that approval occur with no conditions. So I will throw it back to Sam to put up the standard documents if needed. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. This is Chair Riley. Are there any questions for Mr. Williams? Commissioner DeJoy, is your hand up from an earlier hand raising?
Yes, I'm sorry, I will.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing questions. Any questions for Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams is the applicant here.
The applicant, I do see the applicant, and there she is.
Welcome. Is there anything you'd like to add to the report from Mr. Williams? And if you could state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
My name is Deanna Sepinen. I'm the director of the High Winds Fund at McAllister College, so focusing on the neighborhood around campus and some community relations work. And business address is 1600 Grand Avenue, St. Paul. And I don't necessarily have additions to the report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sepinen. I appreciate it. Any questions for the applicant from the committee? All right, seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Catherine Plessner, I see your hand. You're here to speak in favor of this application?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
My name is Catherine Plessner. I live at 2038 Summit Avenue. And I just wanted to take this moment to have appreciation of you the planning zoning board of the planning commission. Oh my goodness. You are doing great work and really hard work. And I'm a neighbor in McAllister Groveland, and I've been on the district council for ridiculous numbers of years. But I just want to say what the staff, your staff is, I'm always so impressed and moved, and the hard decisions you have to make. This one is an easy one, but I wanted to be able to say that McAllister is such a great neighbor to our community and our city. They just, our next upcoming, Matt Groveland is doing an equity development scorecard, and a professor at McAllister is helping us with her class. They engaged their class in our civic duties and classes, and they bring such diversity to us. They host our organic compost site. And I just want to say, please approve this, because McAllister is a great neighbor. And I want to just share some good news with you, because you've got tough stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? I'll ask one last time, anyone here to speak in favor of the application, and seeing none, we'll move on to those in opposition. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application of McAllister College for a campus boundary expansion? Anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? And last time, anyone here to speak in opposition to this application from McAllister College? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion or discussion from the committee. The staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit for expansion of the McAllister College campus boundary to include 1657 Lincoln Avenue. Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I'll move the staff recommendation for approval of the conditional use permit for expansion of McAllister College campus boundary to include 1657 Lincoln Avenue.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Is there a second?
Commissioner DeJoy, second.
Thank you, Commissioner DeJoy. So the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, Ms. Langer, will you call the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Ms. Langer. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
And we will, the Planning Commission will have the final say on that one a week from tomorrow. Our final, last but not least, 21-329-684 643 Virginia CUP, which is a conditional use permit for the reuse of a large structure to convert a former school to a Black Youth Arts and Healing Center / supportive housing facility for 16 residents at 643 Virginia Street. And I want to thank the folks at the Irreducible Grace Foundation and their colleagues for wading through all of this. Mr. Johnson, go ahead with your presentation.
So good afternoon, commissioners. As Chair Riley stated, the application that you have before you is for a conditional use permit for reuse of large structure at 643 Virginia Street in the old city school building. So this 38,686.5 square foot parcel is located at the intersection of Virginia and LaFond. It has frontage on 3 streets, Virginia, LaFond, and Western. And Western Avenue is considered a collector classified street. The site is served by local bus routes in close proximity on Thomas Avenue and Como Avenue, and it's a little over a quarter mile from the Western Avenue light rail station. The site is currently zoned RT1, 2-family residential. There's RT1 zoning to the north, east, and south of the subject parcel, and R4 single-family residential zoning to the west. The property is currently an institutional use, a school. There's an institutional land use in the undeveloped parcel to the north. There's single-family land uses to the east, single-family and duplex land uses to the south, and single-family land uses to the west. So this subject structure was originally constructed in 1901, before the first zoning code. In 1922, when the first zoning code was enacted, the subject structure was zoned, or subject property was zoned B residence. In 1975, when the modern zoning code was adopted, the subject property was zoned RT1 and has remained zoned as such till today. The property is currently being used as a charter school. However, they have outgrown this site and they are building a new school nearby at the intersection of Marion and University, and they have put the property up for sale. The applicant now has a purchase agreement with the school to make this the future home of the Black Youth Healing Arts Collective. So this applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for the reuse of a approximately 21,000 square foot school in order to build the headquarters for the Black Youth and Arts Healing Collective / a supporting housing facility for 16 residents with space for programming. In the current RT1 zoning, you could have a maximum of up to 6 residents in a supportive housing facility without obtaining a conditional use permit or rezoning the parcel. So I wanted to give you guys a quick kind of run through of what they are proposing to convert the school into. So in the basement, they're going to have a cafeteria and / kitchen, some flex space, space for their boiler and other mechanical equipment, and then some workspace. On the first floor, they're proposing to have a gym, dog training room, wellness center, offices and more flex space, counseling office, computer labs, a nursery, and also an art room. And then on the second, on the top floor, they're having, there's bedrooms for the residents, and the bedrooms are a mix of doubles, triples, and quads. There's an apartment for the property manager, and then there's also some shared kitchen and dining space. So in order for the Planning Commission to recommend approval of the reuse of large structure, there are findings that need to be met for both the reuse of large structure and conditional use permits generally. So I'll start with going through the findings for the reuse of large structure. The first finding that needs to be met is that the Planning Commission shall find that the structure cannot reasonably be used for a conforming purpose. And staff has found that this finding is met. The structure is 20,795 square feet with only 8 classrooms. Although it has remained a school since the time it was constructed, the limited size and number of classrooms available has made the subject structure increasingly less viable as a school and for potential new school users. Conversely, the structure is too large to be reasonably used for conforming purposes in the RT1 2-family district, such as a duplex or a supportive housing facility that'd be limited to 6 residents. This proposed reuse of a large non-residential structure will enable 16 residents to be housed at this location with adequate space to accommodate programming that might not otherwise be available in support of housing projects that are limited to fewer residents. The second finding that needs to be met, and this finding is for both the reuse of large structure and for conditional use permits generally, is that the Planning Commission shall find that the proposed use and plans are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff has found that this finding is also met. The property is located in an area defined by the comprehensive plan as an urban neighborhood, and it's a little over a quarter mile from the Western Avenue neighborhood node. The subject property has frontage on Western Avenue, which is classified as a collector street. And the intensity of the proposed supportive housing facility is consistent with policy LU 35, which calls for providing multifamily housing along arterial and collector streets in urban neighborhoods. This proposal is also consistent with the general goal of the Arts and Education chapter of the Frogtown SMAPL, which is the neighborhood plan, which is to incorporate art, education, and wellness into the physical and social infrastructure of Frogtown. The final two findings that need to be met for the reuse of large structure is that the Planning Commission shall find that the proposed use and structural alterations or additions are compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and land uses. This finding is met. There are no exterior structural alterations or additions proposed as a part of this application. And the second and the last finding is for a petition. This finding is also met. A petition was not required at the time of this application due to Emergency Executive Order 2020-29. So in addition to the findings, which I've just gone through for the reuse of large structure, there's also findings for all conditional use permits. The second finding for all conditional use permits is that the use will provide adequate ingress and egress to minimize traffic congestion in public streets. This condition is met. There's vehicular ingress and egress to this site to a surface parking lot, which is accessed off of LaFond Avenue, which is indicated here by this arrow. It is anticipated that the proposed use will have minimal traffic impacts and will not significantly increase traffic congestion on LaFond and other nearby public streets. The third finding for all conditional use permits is that the use will not be detrimental to the existing character of development in the immediate neighborhood or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. Staff has found that this condition is also met. The structure has been a school since 1901, but can no longer adequately accommodate most schools' operations because of its limited size and limited number of classrooms. This conditional use permit for the reuse of large structure will help facilitate the preservation of the subject structure and will not be detrimental to the existing character of development in the immediate neighborhood. Staff has also found that the proposed use will not endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare, provided a building permit to change the occupancy of the structure and a certificate of occupancy are obtained. The final two findings is that the use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. This condition is met. The applicant is not proposing to expand the structure in any way at this time, and the reuse will not impede the normal and orderly development for surrounding properties. The final finding is that the use shall in all other respects conform to applicable regulations of the district in which it's located, and this condition is also met. So based on the findings that we have just gone through, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit for a reuse of large non-residential structure at 643 Virginia Street, subject to the following conditions. Final plans approved by the zoning administrator for this use shall be in substantial compliance with the plan submitted and approved as part of this application. The second condition is that the applicant shall obtain a building permit to change the occupancy type of the structure and a certificate of occupancy. And the third condition that staff is recommending is that the number of residents receiving services shall not exceed 16. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions that the committee has.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions for Mr. Johnson from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, does the applicant have anything to add to Mr. Johnson's presentation? I think Dr. Fry is here. Or if there's another person from the group who'd like to say anything.
Hello, I'm Dr. Fry, the Irreducible Grace Foundation. Our business address is 585 Fuller Avenue in St. Paul, 55103. I thank you all for your time and for hearing our request. I know that you probably also know, being city residents, that there's a great need for housing for young people, especially young people of color, and that there's also a lot of work to be done around healing for our young people. So I thank you for your time, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your time and patience for getting us to your last on the agenda. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Fry? All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. And if there's anyone here to speak in favor of this application, a conditional use permit for 643 Virginia Avenue for the Black Youth Healing Arts Collective, which is a reuse of a large structure to convert the former school to that center in supportive housing for up to 16 residents. So is there anybody here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone to speak in favor of the application? Do have to ask 3 times. One last time, anybody to speak in favor of the application, and then we'll move on to those in opposition. Is there anyone here in opposition to this application? Anyone here to speak in opposition to this application? Apologies, my cat is exploring behind me and making a bit of a ruckus. I'm really sorry. Anyone else to speak anyone to speak in opposition of this application? Great. I don't see anybody, so I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion and/or discussion. Commissioner Said.
Thanks, Chair. I have a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Said, for moving to approve the staff recommendation. Is there a second from another member of the committee? Commissioner Grill.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Is there any discussion? All right. Ms. Langer, will you take the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy,
Yes.
and Chair Riley.
Yes.
5 in favor, 0 oppose.
Great. And then that will go to the Planning Commission a week from tomorrow. And I just want to say that I think that this project is really exciting, both for young people and for the adults that they will become. And I'm really happy to see the Irreducible Grace Foundation here in front of us with this application. So thank you, everybody, for your time today. I think that covers our agenda, and we are adjourned. See you all in a week.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.